This feels like a fun time to discuss Prohibition, because it's my special interest, and no other reason. Prohibition actually started in America as a movement in the 19th century and was associated with the idea of women's rights. A lot of homes were single income. The man would go to work and the woman would stay home. The man would get paid on Saturday at the end of the week of work, and that was all the pay that family would receive. Instead of bringing the money home to his wife to buy food and clothes for their children, a lot of men would go to the local bar and buy alcohol instead, leaving the family completely destitute. Does that sound familiar? So women tried to organize a movement to ban the sale of alcohol so that the husbands wouldn't have anything to spend it on. The movement didn't really gain any traction in the 19th century though, because people don't like it when you take alcohol away from them. But by the start of the 20th century, a lot of things had changed. The South now had a free black population and had gone through most of Reconstruction by that point. Black people very smartly realized that white people would never, ever make a system that worked for them. Does that sound familiar? And not all of them could do something about that, but many of them chose to relocate and build their own communities. So America, which had been built on agriculture, suddenly had a drastically reduced working population. And they did what they do best: mass media campaigns. Suddenly in Europe, especially in poorer countries, there was massive advertising. Come to America. It's a land of opportunity, a land of the free. Anyone can come and we will accept you. And you can build wealth, which you can't in this old world. Give me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. Sound familiar? And a lot of them believed that and immigrated. The Irish, the Scottish, the Eastern Europeans, the Polish, the Austrians, the Italians, all took advantage of what they saw as this new opportunity and immigrated to the United States. But they got here and saw that what they were expected to do was work really hard, crappy jobs for next to nothing in terms of pay. Sound familiar? So they began to organize and form labor movements, and a key part of this were the traditional drinking holes associated with each culture. This is where we get a lot of our traditional restaurant establishments like Irish pubs and German alehouses. The men would get together after work to drink and get to talking and realize that the conditions they were in were terrible, the pay was not enough to support them, and there was no guarantee of building towards the future that they were promised. So they started organizing strategic hits, strikes, fighting back against the bosses that were taking advantage of them. And the bosses did not like that. It took some time to pay off the right people and get the right people elected, but eventually they were able to get enough politicians who supported them in government, that sounds familiar, to enact the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the sale and distribution of alcohol. Now, the wording of that is key. It was not illegal to possess alcohol. A lot of people looked at that and said, well, this isn't going to apply to me and my one glass of wine before bed each night. This is to solve the immigrant problem, the crime rate that is rising because of them, the housing that they occupy, the jobs that they've stolen from us. Sound familiar yet? This means that the immigrants will no longer be able to organize. And even at this point, it was still couched in the media as a movement in women's rights, telling that same old story of the poor mothers left at home just to get this movement out there, hiding the true motivations behind it, because they didn't actually care about helping the women. Does that sound familiar? Suddenly when the ban was being enforced, no one could understand why they were getting in trouble for buying their regular alcohol. This was supposed to solve the immigrant issue and apply only to them, not to me. And the wealthy people were okay. They were able to pay off the police or get the governor to turn his head the other way. But it hurt the everyday person because they were getting in a lot of trouble for their regular alcohol consumption. Does that sound fucking familiar? Now, there's a lot more behind this, and there's a lot of reasons why it was overturned after 10 years. But to this day, this is the only amendment to the Constitution that has ever been repealed. And although a lot of marginalized people had already realized that the government doesn't work for them, for a lot of people in my great-grandparents' generation, this was the first time they had realized that the government has ulterior motives and agendas when it comes to handling its citizens. If you want to know more, I learned a lot of what I know from Ken Burns' documentary Prohibition. And even if you don't, I would encourage you to be thinking a lot about this story. Remember, kids, it's not always what the government does that's important. It's how and why they do it.